Beyond Good and Evil 2 is an upcoming action-adventure game developed by Ubisoft Montpellier and published by Ubisoft. The game is a sequel, but in the actual game timeframe is a prequel to the 2003 fan favorite Beyond Good and Evil. Beyond Good and Evil 2 was announced back in 2017, and little to no news has really been released about the title, and fans have wondered if this potentially means the game has been put on hold or cancelled altogether. So let's break down the timeline and what to expect from the future of the series, and if it is truly cancelled. As always, all the sources will be linked down below, so make sure to check those out and support those original articles. And with that out of the way, let's get into Beyond Good and Evil 2. Let's start with a timeline for the project. I know people usually state E3 2017 with the cinematic trailer as the first news about the game and the reveal, but we can actually get more specific than that. In late 2016, Michel Ancel, the original creator of Beyond Good and Evil, started to post what looks like concepts for an upcoming Beyond Good and Evil game. And then in October of 2016, Ubisoft did confirm the rumors that a new Beyond Good and Evil game was in development at Ubisoft Montpellier. Now this is important because this is just concept, and it sounds like at the time was just starting development, so they were still working through the production phases and understanding what this game would be. And note that that was in late 2016. And then it was about 8 months later when the E3 press conference was when they showed off that cinematic trailer. And I would say most likely the trailer work started right around the time that Ubisoft announced the project was being worked on. I bet they hired a trailer company and had them start to work on it so they could have a big announcement, even though the game was still trying to figure out what it was going to be and what the style and gameplay and all the other ideas. But I think Ubisoft was really pushing to get the game out there and talked about as soon as possible. Which is why I'm always cautious of these initial trailers and why they are usually more proof of concept than anything else, and you will hear me mention that as we go along, talking about this game and other things they have shown off since then. Games of this size and scope take years to make and can change drastically throughout that time, which is why it's so important to state that in 2016, the game was just starting and it is still years away if they wanted to make the game they were promising. Now at E3, no release date or platforms were announced for this game. It was just an announcement with a great looking trailer, so fans weren't sure if this was going to be a current gen title, next gen, or maybe a combination of both. And the next announcement was in 2018, also at E3, where another trailer was shown off for the game, which once again was a high budget cinematic trailer. And this time though, a pre-alpha demo was shown off for the game as well. And this demo was made specifically to be shown off at E3 and is likely more proof of concept than anything else, was created to just give fans and journalists the feel of what they were going for the game, what they're trying to accomplish, and things they're trying to include. A few parts of it did look clunky and other parts looked really well, but once again, these are a few polished pieces they decided to put together and show off for E3, and is most likely going to change by the time the actual game comes out. It seemed at this point to still lack substantial gameplay aside from exploration, and the way most of the trailer was done without loading screens is an impressive feat, but can lead to issues with games of this sheer size and scope when they keep expanding, and if they can truly make a non-loading screen game where we can go into space, come back down, fly to all these different places is yet to be seen. And it almost reminds me of a Star Citizen-esque situation. I know it's not exactly the same, but a pitch that becomes too big and reasonable to make. And this was the same issue with the original canceled Beyond Good and Evil 2 that was being worked on in the late 2000s or early 2010s. The team decided to step away from the project after deciding that it needed next generation power to make the game they wanted, but by the time they would get next generation power and update their game, the game would be outdated and it would take even more work to constantly revamp and get the game where they wanted it, which is why the original sequel was shelved, and it seems that Ubisoft is walking this line again with this game as well. Once again, they're using these consoles and technology to the fullest extent, but at what point is there just not enough power and a game just has to be made is yet to be seen, and I just hope they don't fall into this same trap that they did with the original sequel. Which kind of leads me to the point, if their systems do work, if they can deliver no loading screens, vast exploration, spacecraft travel, all these different worlds, it looks like this game could easily be a Game of the Year contender and be one of the must-played titles for next generation consoles. But it also could easily fail in the form of trying to do everything and excelling at nothing, or constant delays could hurt the franchise moving forward if we never get the game because it's always just one more year delay. So after E3 2018, it's assumed that Ubisoft continued to work on the title throughout 2019 and 2020 while staying quiet, and hopefully giving the game developers time to fully flesh out this world, enhance the gameplay and story, and then hopefully polish the game enough to a point where they could start to consider a release date. Then of course in 2020 there was COVID, which no doubt caused delays in production and development. Ubisoft wasn't too vocal about any of this, but it's safe to assume that there were some work from home and changes that had to be made. And that wasn't the only bump in the road for Beyond Good and Evil 2. It was also announced that Michel Ancel was leaving the project and the gaming industry altogether. He was the game director on the original game and now the game director for the sequel, and it came as a big shock to fans and the industry alike. And fans weren't sure where this was going to leave this sequel that was still seemingly in the middle of development. It also makes now a little bit more sense as to why Ubisoft was staying quiet about the project, if they were looking for a new game director and didn't want to worry fans who were anxiously waiting this game. And when Ancel announced he was leaving, though, he did make an Instagram post, which he said that he has transitioned out of the company for many months and the teams were still moving forward without him, so Ubisoft waited for the perfect response and he was willing to work with them. Now, I wish this is where the story ended, but unfortunately it's not, and there was a report by The Liberation, which went into the culture and accusations of toxic leadership by Michel Ancel while working on Beyond Good and Evil 2. Now, the original article is in French, so we will be using Kotaku's reporting for the most part, just to give you guys an idea of what the accusations are. But they state that Ancel did confirm to Liberation that he was being investigated by Ubisoft for toxic management style. Employees who spoke to the Liberation stated the game was in development hell for 7 years, which leads me to believe that maybe the canceled game and this new prequel are tied together and they've always had people working on this franchise with little to no real movement or noise. And the reason it was in development hell was due to Ancel's constantly changing the scope and features of the game and burning out the team members. Liberation also claims that Ancel would have teams abandon months of work on a whim and would tell the press new features about the game before informing the team. It also closes by saying that additional management was brought in to the studio as a mediator between Ancel and the team when things got really bad between the two parties. Now, Ancel took to Instagram to deny these rumors and state that his job as director is to bring vision to the game, and it's the producers and managers' job to decide what to do, when, and how to do it. He also closed by saying that a few members of the team want to destroy him and his projects, and he also claims that he left on his own and Ubisoft did not force him out. Now, there are a ton of smaller details on both sides and articles that you can read up on, so I'll link some articles down below if you want to get more information or hear more details about this. But I do want to quickly interject and give my thoughts. I tend to believe both sides are telling the truth. Ancel has been developing games since the 1990s and has been in the director role for games since 2003 with the first Beyond Good and Evil. And I think that Ancel, because of this, has a different mindset when it comes to how games are developed and the role of the game director. While I would say a lot of the employees are from a more modern era of game development and understand that they need to be treated and respected a certain way. So I think that he was also true about him leaving on his own accord. I think the investigation just proved to be too much for Ancel, regardless of the outcome, and decided it would be less stress to just move away from the gaming industry altogether. Now, I'm not excusing his behavior or anything that he did, but I think that's kind of the background, and it would explain why the original sequel was canceled and now why we're seeing seemingly problems and delays with this game. And it really kind of creates a new timeline between the canceled game and this 2017 prequel, and explains why game announcement and details have been so sporadic in the past few years, considering they were probably always changing the vision, the scope, and what to include in this game. So where does that leave us now? Well, the CEO of Ubisoft gave an update on the release window for the game during an earnings call with investors. One investor asked directly about Beyond Good and Evil 2 and when they can expect the game, because they're expecting it to boost up Ubisoft, obviously, once it releases. And Guillemot responded saying the game is not one of the 5 AAA games that are being released in their next fiscal year, which is between April 2020 and April 2021. The reason this was even an option is because we currently know 3 out of those 5 games. We know it's going to be Gods and Monsters, Rainbow Six Quarantine, and Watch Dogs Legion, along with 2 other mystery titles, given why investors were interested if one of these was going to be Beyond Good and Evil 2. So what that means for us is the earliest release date for the game will be in Ubisoft's next fiscal year after that, which is now a late 2021 or early 2022 release date. And I said at the earliest. Ubisoft didn't directly say this is when the game would release, they just said it was not in the next fiscal year. But one at least reassuring piece of news we did get was in September of 2020, the team stated in a blog post that internal milestones were met and that early builds of the game were building on the promises of the tech demos shown at E3. Ubisoft Paris was also brought on to assist in development, and the team is hoping to show more of the game next year. They don't directly say whether more of the game means gameplay or another cinematic trailer. I would say it's probably safe to assume at this point we've already seen 2 cinematic trailers, and we hopefully should be getting more actual concrete game details and see more gameplay and what this next gen Beyond Good and Evil 2 can do and what the actual gameplay cycle and loop will be like. So what happens now? Well, hopefully more gameplay will be coming next year, and more than likely it will probably be released at E3 given their track record of attending E3s and doing these big reveals there. It's also possible it could be at Ubisoft's own Forward event, which they have been doing, so we'll just have to wait and see whether they want to do E3 if it's back, or if it just makes more sense to do Ubisoft's own event. And if the game is progressing as well as they say, then a late 2021 or early 2022 release date is not completely out of the question. Back to the original question of the video, is this game canceled? No, the game is not canceled. It seems like the game was announced too early back in 2017 when they probably should have waited. They knew the game was early in development and that a trailer was being forced out when the game was still trying to piece together what it was actually going to be. There were problems behind the scenes. So it seems like there were a lot of different issues between where to take the game, the trailers, rushing out to show things at E3 and keeping people interested in the franchise. And I think it just led to a bursting point where I think finally now the game is back on track. They have development timelines. They know where they need to take this game to get it released. And hopefully the studio is past all these bumps in the road and have a clear picture for the game they want to create. And it lives up to the expectations of fans who have been waiting almost 2 decades for a new Beyond Good and Evil game. But that's where I'm going to end this video. I know this is a slightly different video than I normally make. I have a few different running series. This one was more just covering the timeline and seeing what's been said about the game and if it's canceled. So if you guys would like and everything we know about Beyond Good and Evil 2, let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like and share this video, subscribe for weekly gaming news, and I will see you guys in the next one.